Hey guys, welcome back to Tennessee Urban Garden. I'm Kelly. Today we're going to be making hamburger dill pickles, and it's going to be out of my Ball Blue Book. And let's get started. All right, this is the one I'm using. I have a couple different blue books that they put out throughout the years. This is the one I'm using today. And there's the hamburger dills. So what we're going to need, open this back up. All right, what we're going to need is, it says 4 pounds of 4 to 6 inch cucumbers, 6 tablespoons ball salt for pickling, preserving, or you can use Mrs. Wage's, whichever. It just has to be pickling salt, not regular table salt. Like right here, here's pickling and canning salt. You don't want to use your regular salt like this. That's not for canning. So this is all the stuff I'm going to be using. I don't have fresh dill, but I can use the dill seeds I saved from last year off my plant because my dill is not doing very good this year. Mustard seeds, peppercorns, pickle crisp because we want our pickles to stay crisp, vinegar, sugar, and then water. All right. So first thing we want to do is we are going to scrub these. Make sure we get everything off. Get all the little spines off that like to poke people. They're no good. We're going to take all of those off and scrub them. And then when we're done with that, I'm going to slice them on my mandolin. Safety. But this, I have a 3.5 millimeter. I'm going to see if that's the size that I want. If not, I can go smaller. And I'm going to slice them into little rounds. And then before I do that, I'm going to get my brine ready. Now, when you do pickles or anything with a high acidity, you want to use a non-reactive pan. This is a stainless steel pan. It's not reactive, so it won't change the taste or put anything else into your food, and you don't want that. Make sure that your canner is ready to go. I have my jars in there warming up. They've all been washed. My canner's been washed, and then I have my canning station. Everything is ready. My water back here that I use, it's warming up slowly. Make sure you get everything ready before you start doing anything so it can go faster. If you're forgetting things and don't have stuff out, it can make you miss steps or take longer. So make sure you have all your stuff out. And make sure, guys, I washed my sink with soap and water before I filled it up with water for the cucumbers. So make sure you washed it first, so you don't have any residue. I'm just rubbing off any dirt or any of the little pokey spines. I don't know what they're called, but they hurt. I'm getting all those off. Make sure your cucumbers are fresh. These were picked yesterday or today. I do not leave the cucumbers out to use for pickles after a certain amount of days because they get soft and mushy. You want crisp pickles. All right, now I'm going to get the brine ready. So in here I have a quart of white vinegar with 5% acidity, and then I have a quart plus a half a cup, so 4.5 cups of water that we're going to combine. And then it says it needs 6 tablespoons of the pickling and the canning salt. All right. So 1, 3. Four. 5. 6. Okay, and I'm going to stir this together and turn it on medium high, probably about, on mine is about a 6, and then let this bring it, and then start turning up slow and bring it to a boil, and it needs to boil for 10 minutes. All right, while we're waiting for the brine to come up to a boil, we're going to take the cucumbers. Now what you want to do is you want to take the blossom in, which is the side that had the flower on it, the blossom in, and you're going to cut off 1/4 of an inch. Some people say an 1/8. You can do an 1/8 or a 1/4, because you want to cut off the blossom end because it has enzymes on this side that can cause your pickles to become mushy, and we don't want that. So you're going to have to cut off the blossom end. Now I'm going to be using the mandolin, so I'm going to be cutting off the top part and the bottom just so I can stick it on my safety handle thing right there, and I can go back and forth. But if you're cutting these by hand, you can cut these by hand. I just want a uniform size. This is the size I want them all to be, just so they're all the same size. I'm going to put them in this bowl. But remember, cut off your blossom end and discard that. Do not use that. Alright, so I cut off the blossom end and the top. And I'm going to use, you're not supposed to do this, but I'm going to because it won't work with this when it's so tall and lanky. I'm just going to do to about half and then put it on the safety guide to do the rest of it down. But be careful of your fingers. See, there's about half. Now I can put it on there easier and have an easier time of cutting. All right. Alright, so I have them at the size I want them to be. That one kind of got cut. But I'm going to do that to all of these. Remember to watch your hands. Mandolins are no joke. You can cut your fingers straight off. But I'm going to do that to the rest of these and put them in here and get it ready for my brine. Alright guys, I forgot to mention that I am doing quarts, not pints. And I'm going to double the brine that I'm doing. So I'm going to double everything that I'm putting in the jars. I'm doubling because I'm doing quarts. I'm not doing pints. And the recipe that I'm doing, it calls for pints. Alright, I got all of my cucumbers cut into the slices. They're all the same size. Some got chalked off, but that's alright. They'll work just as fine. So this is a lot. If I have any extra, I did extra than normal because you never know how many's going to fit in a jar. You can always end up with different amounts. So I did extra, and if I don't use them, my kids will eat these, so I'm not really worried about it. And then I have my dill. Because I'm doing quart jars, I'm going to do half of a teaspoon of dill per quart jar, and then I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of mustard seed. I'm going to take a pinch of peppercorns, and then I'm going to do 1/4 of a teaspoon pickle granulates for my quart jars. Now if you were doing pint jars, you would only need 1/4 of a tablespoon of dill seed, a 1/4 of a teaspoon, sorry, 1/4 of a teaspoon of dill seed. You would need, let's see, 1/8 of pickle granulates, just probably about 2 peppercorns, and then half of a teaspoon of mustard seed. But I'm doing the bigger jars, and then you need something to debubble the jars, and I have a chopstick. I did have my ball jar debubbler, but it broke. These are not the sturdiest, but I use it for the headspace. But this is what it says you'll need. Now you can use fresh dill. This recipe calls for fresh dill, but I don't have any fresh dills, but you can substitute. A fourth of a teaspoon is equal to 1 head of dill. And it calls for a head of dill for each pint, but I'm doing quarts, so I'm going to be doing a bigger amount of my dill seed. Ready to take the jars out. Now this is not piping hot, but it is pretty warm. And I'm going to take them out, put them over there, and I'm going to start filling them with the cucumbers. And that's going to keep simmering for the remaining time, because it had to simmer for 10 minutes after we brought it to a boil. Got cucumber residue in here. But take these out and fill them up. Alright, so in each jar, I only have 4 in here right now. I'm going to put a half a teaspoon each of dill. And then I need 1 teaspoon of mustard seed for each jar. Pinch of peppercorns, about 6 or 7. All right. And I'm going to wait to put the pickle crisp until last, and then I'm going to start filling these up with cucumbers. My hands are clean, so make sure you wash your hands multiple times if you touch other stuff. Shove them in there. Make sure you pack them in there. Now the wide mouth jars are going to be easier, obviously, because they got a bigger opening. But you can ram them in the sides. And you're going to try to leave a 1/2 inch headspace. Alright, I just poured my hot water on my lids. Remember, this is not a step they say you don't have to do anymore, but I prefer to do this step. It sanitizes it, and you don't have any problem with it sealing. And make sure you sanitize all your stuff. And this is my vinegar water solution. Alright, getting ready to put the brine in. I'm going to take 1/4 of a teaspoon of the pickle crisp, and that is for a quart. You do 1/8 of a teaspoon if you have pints. Alright. Alright, so we're going to take the brine, let it go in, and we're going to put in enough to leave a 1/2 inch headspace. Remember to use your headspace tool. Now I'm going to let it sit there for a second because bubbles are going to travel up, and I'm going to use the chopstick to debubble these jars in a second. You might have to put more in, but the bubbles are going to rise to the top. See how some of this has gone down? I'm just going to lightly tap on the jars. And then I want to take my chopstick and I'm going to go down as far as I can and push to the side. And pull it back. If any pop out, just shove them back down. They're not going to hurt them. And then push it down really good and see how much more you need to put in there. So I need half. And right there's half. You want to bring the brine up to right at half. Okay. And then let it sit there, because more bubbles might come out, and you're going to do that to all these jars. So let's do one more. Take your chopstick or your debubbler, whatever you got. See how there's bubbles coming up to the top? Do it on each side. Help the trapped bubbles get out of there. And push it to the side on all sides, then push it down, and then see what you need. If you need any more brine to make it half an inch. There we go. So these two are done. You're gonna let them sit there, and after I'm done doing all these, I'm gonna tap them again and make sure there's no bubbles left in there. I debubbled all of them. You can tap it a couple more times, push it down. Make sure you get all the bubbles out. That should be good. Now what I'm going to do is wipe all these rims really good, because that was salt water, so you want to get it off, and then I'm going to put a lid and a ring on each, and we're going to throw them back in the canner and let them cook for, let's see how long it says, 15 minutes for pints. But I don't have pints, I have quarts, so it's gonna be, it says 20 to 25 minutes. Now you can feel around the rim that it's clean. There's nothing left on there. You don't want anything left. Now remember, when you're doing this, you don't want to wrench it down. You only want to do it fingertip tight and then stop. When it starts to show resistance, you want to stop. You don't want to do it really tight, because these still have to breathe inside the canner to expel any air. All right, so I got my last one. Go in the canner. Now you want to make sure you have at least an inch. You need an inch of water Now I measured out 1 inch on there and I marked it on mine, so it's over 1 inch. I'm going to take out just a little bit because this will come out because it's so high and you're doing quarts, but I did 1 inch so I knew where it was. And I'm going to take out some of this water. Now I have 1 inch. So I'm going to turn it all the way up to high. Put the lid on and wait for this to come up to a boil. And I know earlier when I was showing you all the stuff I had right here, I had sugar. That was for a different recipe, so I took the sugar away and didn't use the sugar because this hamburger dills did not call for sugar. So just want to tell you that so you don't get confused that I didn't put sugar in. Alright, so the cucumbers, pickles, just came up to a boil. So now I'm going to set my timer. Now I did go back and check it for the quarts, and it's the same as the pints, which is 15 minutes. I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. Now you have to remember this is for my altitude. If you guys live somewhere else and you have a different altitude, you have to add time depending on where you live at, how much more time you have to add when you're using a water bath canner or a pressure cooker. The higher the altitude, the more you have to add to your cook time. But mine, I don't have to add any. So my timer of 15 minutes just went off. We're going to turn it off and you're going to let it sit for 5 more minutes before we take it out. 5 minutes is up. Remember, don't tip them. That one's hissing at me already. Oop, that's hot. See, it's sucking all of the bubbles out of that jar. Alright, make sure you leave space in between them so that they can cool down properly. You can see all of the air being sucked out. Now remember, if you use any type of spices that are ground up or anything, it will affect the color of your liquid inside. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just means that you used ground up spices, but mine should be okay. And I got, oh, there goes one. I got 6 jars out of all those pickles. Actually, I had to cut up one more to finish the jar up, and I rammed the pickles in here as much as I could. I kept pushing them down. But let these sit 24 hours. Don't touch them. Don't move them. Don't do anything to them. Let them sit. The next morning, you wake up, take the bands off, inspect your jars to make sure that they sealed. And if they did, remember you had a brine, so some of it may have came out in the canner. You need to wipe these jars down. And I'll show you that in the morning and then label them. Alright, we're on the next day for our pickles. Pickle chips. What we're going to do is take off the rest of the bands. I have a warm rag and I'm going to wipe down all these jars to make sure there's no residue. And then I'm going to label them. Alright, so I have them all labeled. I wiped them all off. Now you want to check your seals. You can see the little divot on that it's sealed down. Some of these don't show the divot very well, so you have to check them. If you can hold the lid by its, that means it's got a good seal on it. So now these are ready to be taken down and be stored. Now remember, that's just one way. The dill pickle chips is just one way to do pickles. There's lots of different ways to do pickles. You have brine pickles. They're usually more salty and they have a different process. You have your kosher pickles, dill pickles, refrigerator pickles. They're very versatile, so find a recipe that you like out of a trusted source or out of a book, a canning book, and try your hand at pickles. And remember that you need to check the seals every single time after you get done canning, and take off the bands. Never leave your bands on there because it can create a false seal. If you did it correctly, your lids will be sucked down, and you can hold, like I was holding the jar by the lid, and it's not going to go anywhere until you forcibly open it. And just remember to check and make sure they all popped. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Bye guys.